Episode 75. The cost of it all. When you clean out your vacuum cleaner, you yourself are actually becoming a vacuum cleaner. Hello and welcome to the 10 Minute Off-Road Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki G. I'm here to inform, entertain, and delight your ear holes with all things off-road for the next 10 minutes or so. Why 10 minutes? Well, I just let the dog out, and that's usually about how long it takes him to do his business. Barking at cars, that's his business. And crapping a lot, but mostly barking at cars. I would like to remind you, you can listen to the 10 Minute Off-Road Podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Overcast, Breaker, CastBox, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Stitcher, and a bunch of other crappy things you've never heard of either. You can contact and be ignored by the 10 Minute Off-Road Podcast at 10minuteoffroad@gmail.com. That's 10minuteoffroad@gmail.com. Or leave a comment on our YouTube video. That's probably the best way to get to say something. I kind of monitor that, but as far as email, I've got about 125 unanswered emails on the 10 Minute Off-Road account, and let's face it, it's probably going to be about 110 Viagra ads. Yeah, I'm at that age. You can follow and be ignored on the that stick's getting old. You can follow 10 Minute Off-Road Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, but never on TikTok. TikTok is for little girls, and I just can't get into the whole twerking thing. And besides, you do not want to see me twerk. All right, so now that we got all the boilerplate legal mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's get to the meat and potatoes of today's episode. What finally happened at about 285-ish. I think it's close to 289. I'm not exactly sure. Somewhere between 285,000 and 289,000. My beloved Jeep XJ, the engine gave up the ghost. And it didn't really give up the ghost. It just kind of got lost compression in two cylinders, which I suspect is probably a valve, or not a valve, but a head gasket and maybe a lifter problem. But instead of trying to tear into it and just determine what it is, I figured it's time for a rebuild. No sense building the top half of the motor if the bottom half needs replaced. And I knew this day was coming, and I was kind of prepared for it, although I was not financially in the position that I wanted to be. But I can still cover it. I can get my Jeep fixed relatively quick. I'm having a hard time with all the little incidentals, like pulled the exhaust manifold off, and it had a crack in it. So I'm going to attempt to weld it. If not, I'll replace it. The motor mounts were shot. My water pump was fairly new, but do I put a new water pump on? And the same thing with the coil and distributor. Once you start tearing into the engine, you can go down a rabbit hole quick of replacing new things. As far as rebuilding it, I'm not rebuilding it. I don't think I have the patience to do that, and I'd hate to find out that I've done something wrong and then have to tear the whole motor apart again. I've got no problem letting the pros do the pro stuff and me just doing all the whacking and hacking stuff that I do to it. Now, let's face it, I'm really not that good of a mechanic. I kind of sell myself short, I guess, but I know my limitations. Rebuilding the engine, I don't have time for that. I won't say it scares me, but I know when I'm in over my head. So before I pulled the motor out, I did some checking around, called a shop that's near me that I kind of trust the guy, although I don't let anybody touch my Jeep. And I asked him, how much am I looking at to put in a rebuilt engine? Because I didn't want to go used, because I didn't want to be able to. I didn't want to have to do this again next year. So I figured just pull my engine out and rebuild it. This way I know everything fits and lines up and there's no surprises. And the shop quoted me $6,000 to get a rebuilt engine and put it in. Not rebuild my engine, but to get in like a Titan engine or something and put it in, a crate engine and put it in. And $6,000 sounds a lot to me. I normally don't take my vehicles into the shop to get work done. I try to do everything I can myself. So I'm kind of out of touch with labor costs and everything are, but $6,000 just sounded like over the top, considering that about $2,500 is the engine. And you figure another $500 for incidentals. I'm sure they were going to reuse everything that they can reuse. And so you're looking at $3,000 labor for 2 days worth of work at 16 hours, maybe 20 hours. And let's face it, if you're in the shop and you have a lift and all the tools and everything, it's going to go a lot faster for you than it did for me. It took me. It probably took me about 12 hours total to get the engine out from the minute I decided. From the minute I started rolling out the tools to the time I was loading the engine in the truck, it probably took me about 12 hours. So they wanted $6,000 to replace the engine. A sealed rebuilt engine was about $2,500, and I'm getting mine rebuilt. I took it to a local shop. The guy told me it could cost anywhere between $1,800 and $2,500. He said expect around $2,000. Depending on what he finds when he opens it up. Of course, a cracked head is going to run into the $2,500 mark. If he could reuse everything, like the crank, I'm assuming, it'll be closer to $1,600. I kind of made a mistake when I was talking to him, and I said, I'm not really too concerned about the cost. I just want it to last another 300,000 miles. So when I telling the story to my wife, she told me you just doomed yourself to a $3,000 engine rebuild. But we'll see. I've never met the guy before, and I don't want to mention the name of the shop until I get my work back from him and everything. But I got a good, warm, fuzzy feeling from him. He seemed honest, and we talked for about a half hour, had a good chat about Jeeps and engines, and he normally doesn't rebuild 4.0s too much. Mainly because he said they don't break, and so I felt good about that. But he has done some Jeep engines, and he's feeling pretty confident about it, and I feel confident about him. So that's where the cost is on it. I figured I'm going to do it as cheap as possible and do it myself. I won't say cheap, but inexpensive. But I'm also falling through the rabbit hole. Pulled it out. I just put an alternator on it last year, so the alternator's good. But do I go with a new water pump? Thermostat I just put on a few months ago. Do I put the new thermostat in? It's coming up on summer. Do I leave the thermostat out? Because I usually leave it out for the summer. And then when I pull the engine out, I noticed my driver's side motor mount was toast, which is probably why the exhaust manifold had some cracks in it. Now I'm on the fence. I've got a new manifold in my Amazon cart ready to ship, but I'm going to try to weld the cracks in mine first just to see if I can weld it. And it's almost impossible to see the exhaust manifold, so Goober welds will work in this situation as long as they seal it. But who knows? I'm going to try it. And I've been rambling on for 20 minutes. Holy crap. All right, so way over time. So I'm going to put a pin and circle back to this. And until next time, this is Nicky G saying, wheel what you got and be happy.